The big risk when you have a place, when you have a place to present something, the big risk is to become a museum. The big risk is to become a place where people are coming to see shows on the wall. But what about an artist working with a scientist, or an artist working with a tech and a scientist and a dancer, a performance artist working with a theater guy or a theater company or a dance company? At a certain point, the science or the technology or I like to say mathematicians, because they're going to create something different. And I think that these artists, science people, tech people, they all have, when they are good, they all have the same objective: try to save the world. We were starting to present the first ideas of the institute, and then Suzanne arrived with. I said maybe we could try to build something together, because that's the point. Talking about consciousness, talking about brains, and it was kind of obvious that we had to develop something together.
My own scientific research deals with prediction, how we predict other people's actions, and particularly language, and how our brain pre-processes information to be able to process the information faster when it actually comes in. And we do that every day, and that's how we can function rapidly and efficiently. Initially, what Marina wanted was to do a study where she could get insight into her own experience through the brain visualization, for example, learn something from the brain imaging about her own experience. That led to measuring the magic of mutual gaze. This was first shown at the Garage Center for Contemporary Culture, which was Marina's retrospective. What we did is to really create an experiment room in the museum. That was the idea. And so what we ended up with was two rotating brains that were rotating, and they were pulsating at frequencies that was most dominant in each person's brain, broadly in the area where the activity was coming from, at moments of synchrony, which is basically just a comparison of the brain waves between the two people. When that was high, you saw these lightning bolts kind of connecting the two rotating brains together. And that was something that was in the installation strictly for the audience, because what we wanted to do was to create a true neuroscience experiment. There's research on what happens to one brain when somebody's looking you straight in the eye, but there's very little, if not no research on what happens to the interaction of brain activity between two people as they're engaging in mutual gaze together. I think people who work at the interface of art and science, or artists who are interested in science and vice versa, everybody will have a different answer to the question of what the actual relationship is and should be between art and science. What my personal goal is with these projects is to really try to see if you can create a hybrid project where it's both science and it's art, and it answers questions that are of interest to both and to the intersection of the two. And Lauren at Princeton with Uri Hassan had done a study where she was telling a story, and then they had a bunch of people listen to the story, and they compared the brain activity in fMRI directly from her as she was telling the story, and listeners as they were listening to the story. And so we did this research together. And then I was also talking about what we were trying to do with measuring the magic of mutual gaze. And it turned out that she had a similar idea, at least from terms to do something with a neurofeedback component of brainwave synchronization with the compatibility eraser.
The compatibility eraser is basically a car that is fueled by how similar the brain responses of the two people inside are, which means that two people are sitting inside of the compatibility eraser, they're facing each other, they're wearing EEG headsets measuring their brain responses. and they're either having a conversation, or they're relaxing, listening to the same thing, or they're moving in the same way, or doing anything that might feel like they're clicking with each other or communicating in some way or another. And depending on how successful that communication is, that fuels the car. So the car will speed up when the two people are in sync, and it will slow down when they're not in sync. So in essence, the compatibility racer is an actual experience of how the brain facilitates communication. The goal is that when you ride the compatibility racer, you can actually feel the biology that underlies communication. Anyone can ride the compatibility racer and sort of understand that feeling of clicking with someone and how that translates into the speed at which you're traveling, which immediately makes the brain accessible. It transforms this notion that brain alignment underlies successful communication into an actual physical manifestation.
So what is my experience about driving this kind of car? It's really interesting how to tune with the brain with somebody else. And experience is very simple. When I try something very hard, it doesn't work at all. When you really relax and concentrate on the breathing and somehow come to the blank state of mind that they're really like almost in kind of empty space, when things let it go, so that the car take it over and you can actually in a very subtle way feel the other person sitting opposite of you, and you can get into the same synchronized rhythm, and the car can go smooth, or you can stop, or you can accelerating or slow down the movement. So it's really depending from that from the state of mind. And it's so interesting because I think there's such a great example of mixing the science and in a certain way the spiritual state of mind. And that's what I am interested in this experiment. But I'm also interested in aspects of long duration, because as longer you're doing this experiment, as longer you engage with the other person, the better things get, and actually the more connection is established. And here is everything about communication and connection with the other person.
Beautiful, very beautiful.
The mutual wave machine developed sort of in parallel to the compatibility eraser. There was overlap, and it was more a follow-up for us personally to measuring the magic of mutual gaze. But the compatibility eraser was important in its conception. The idea for the mutual wave machine came about when I saw Peter Burr's short animation film Alone with the Moon, which deals with depression and loneliness. And what I was realizing is that we had a couple of projects that all dealt with the same question of connectedness, relating brainwave synchronization, relating to some visualization or artistic output. We teamed up with Peter Burr to help us create these powerful black and white visuals that I'd seen in his work that kind of flow in and out of abstraction and flow in and out of darkness, and then use that for the visualization on the machine. So this is an installation that is in a completely dark environment, right? And the only light source is the visualization on the machine. So if there's no synchrony, you are in complete darkness. And then as synchrony increases, you see the machine kind of fills up with light slowly. And because the scale of synchrony goes in and out, like the brainwaves go in and out, like all of this is also like you get more light and less light and more light and less light. And as this increases, like this noise, these white noise patterns, you also slowly start to distinguish a recognizable pattern. And as this happens, you then clearly see that what you're actually looking at behind the noise is a real-time video image of yourself. So when you have perfect synchrony, you are looking and you're clearly seeing the other person that you're looking at. You're also seeing a mirror image of yourself. It's represented by the light, and like you're looking, and you can start exploring your own image at that time. You can see yourself move, and it's at the same time, it's also you have to make choices at that point, because are you going to look at yourself right behind the person, or are you going to look at the person directly and try to keep that connection physically going with the person, or are you more focused on what's happening around you, and does that then, you know, decrease that synchrony again? One thing that I think is one of the strongest effects of these installations on the experience of the people who are sitting in them, apart from like just the wow factor that happens with like, oh, you're seeing your own brain activity, and the possible educational value and the value of like art-science collaborations, is that people are forced to actually try to connect, and they do this all the time on a daily basis to each other without thinking about it. When you walk down the street with somebody, you automatically walk in pace with this other person without you even thinking about it. And you might not even have a sense of rhythm. Like you might be terrible dancing, but you do this all the time. And then, but when you're like, when you get this feedback component and you're like in this situation where you're like, okay, so now we need to connect. What do we actually do to do that? And that's actually where for me the most, that comes from an direction that I didn't expect at all. Like I didn't expect that to be one of my strongest experience to take out of this. And I think for the participants as well, you force them to take this very natural thing that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, and we're like always wondering why we are not really clicking with this one person, or we are, and that you take that out of their subconscious and like force them to like take that into their conscious. Beginning, when I went into this, I was like, this is going to be a side project and it's going to be detrimental to my science career. It's not going to help because people are not, scientists are not interested in this. But I now see that that is not necessarily true. They are, the National Science Foundation and foundations of different countries are interested in these types of projects and in pursuing it into explorations of taking neuroscience out of the lab into real world environments. For example, and that doesn't mean that we have a perfect setup right now, but that's the beauty and the challenge of doing science research anyway.